Welcome to Chaos, Courage and Coffee, the podcast for anyone who's felt like on the outside I'm holding it together, but inside I'm struggling.
And we do it with honesty, heart, and just enough coffee to get through the day. Today's episode is why everyday conversations misfire and simple tools to fix them. Good morning. How you doing?
I'm good. So we're continuing with episode number 2 this week in our short series on communication. And today we're going to be talking about askers, guessers, fixers, and processors.
Oh my goodness. Have we got to be one or another? Let's find out who we are.
All right. So the first thing, let's address the askers and guessers. All right. So some people are more direct than others. Some people like to drop hints that get missed by others. And so, what we're talking about when we talk about askers versus guessers, some people will be straight up front, ask questions, not a problem at all. The guessers are more inclined to drop hints and expect that from those hints, the other person is going to understand their intent or what they're looking for.
Okay, I think we need to give some examples here.
Okay.
Actually, before we do, which one are you? An asker or a guesser?
I think I am much more an asker.
Right.
I will say what I want and go from there. I think my wife is much more of a guesser. She'll drop hints and expect me to read her mind. It's taken me more than 20 years for her to understand that I'm not a mind reader. Mind reading doesn't work, and that if she wants something, she has to tell me straight up, this is what I want.
My husband said to me, he said, if you want something or you want it done or you need something, just tell me. Don't expect me to guess.
Yeah.
Did that make any difference? No. I'm still expecting everybody to, well, all right, having said that, so you've taken 20 years to kind of work this with your wife. I've been working on myself, and I did discover probably about 10 years ago that, yeah, I was this hint dropper, and I would get so frustrated because it didn't happen. And it was, a group that I was belonged to, and it was like oh, you actually have to tell people if you want it done? I was like, "Really?" So I have been working really hard, so I've known this for a while. So there's a lot of people out there like me who do like to do the hints and expect people. We don't realize we're doing it. So let's be fair to ourselves. I'm not having a go at anybody here. What today is about is highlighting for you what's going on. If you think, gosh, I said it in plain English, why is it not happening? And you get really frustrated about it. Okay, it really, really winds you up because this thing isn't happening and you think you were clear about it. Well, the news is that on the other side, for everybody who's on the receiving end of your hints, it was not clear at all.
Yes. And from the asker's side, sometimes when you're asking, you might come across as being blunt or rude because we're not necessarily being subtle. We're coming straight out with it. Can we do this? I want to do this. Can you get that? And so on. And so that can cause offense. So sometimes we might need to modify our language. And I think this goes on both sides. Obviously, the guessers need to be a little bit more direct, and the askers need to be a little bit more, perhaps gentle in the language that we use, to make sure that we are not putting people offside. Now, I do want to point out that this isn't I don't think, a scientifically recognized framework, if you like. It was around about 2007, came out on the internet. Somebody asked a question, and the answer was there is an ask culture and a guess culture. And this is where this sort of terminology really came from. So it's, and if we think about it, I think, we're both one or the other. And I think in a lot of circumstances, I'm going to generalize, huge generalization here. I think men are much more askers, and women perhaps being a little bit more empathetic, soft, and caring, tend to be a little bit more guessers. And so this could be where I did say it's huge generalization, so bear with that one. But I think that's where some of our conflict might come from within some of our relationships.
Well, I kind of agree with you that it might be a masculine feminine thing, but also the group that I mentioned I was going to was about personality. And so I learned it's also a personality
Mm,
thing. So because I certainly can tell you plenty of askers who are women, so I think yes, it's definitely, I think it's more masculine feminine, because, and I think you've already said it, because the feminine is more empathetic, less direct, and masculine is more like, right, we're going to get this done, you do this, I want this, blah blah blah. So, and of course it doesn't actually matter. The thing is about identifying yourself. What's your tendency? Because this is all about miscommunication. And so this is one big flag for you about what's going on. So you think you've told somebody, you think you've been clear, and then it's frustrating because you haven't been. And then there's the flip side, which is, I feel, when people are very direct, that it is quite blunt and I'm being told what to do, or I feel they're being too assertive. And I think that's why I've become more of the kind of just suggesting things gently, because I don't want to be a huge assertive person and it comes over as assertive. So I think there's a reason that we fall on the side that we do. And let's throw in there, we might not always be one or the other, but we're just taking the two extremes so that you can clearly see when communication can go so wrong. And this is one reason why.
yeah, absolutely. And I definitely agree with you that it's not a one or the other, and it can be a sliding scale between the two as well. There can be, as I said, if knowing that I'm an asker, I try to modify my tone, and we talked a little bit about tone last time. Modify my language so that I don't come across as being rude or abrupt or anything like that. I use please, can you please do this, or try to soften the tone when I do it with intent,
Mm.
be more gentle. So it
So,
does
so I
come.
think the awareness comes into it. And this
Yeah,
is what we're about today. We are flagging up the awareness of askers, guessers. You can decide where you sit, when you sit, but it's about being aware so you can adjust it to your advantage.
absolutely. All right. I want to talk about the next one,
Okay.
procedures and processes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this does come up in a lot of different ways, and there are different terms, and this is the one that we've chosen in our conversations: fixes versus processes. So, the original concept came up in a completely different way, and it was when somebody is sharing information, do you want to be heard? Do you want me to fix it? Or do you want to cuddle? All right, around whatever you're sharing. Now, for a lot of men, and I know myself included, we are very action oriented and we go to fixing. Where sometimes, and I know particularly my wife, she would come home from work sometimes, she would have a particularly difficult or troublesome incident or day at work, whatever the case might be. She would come home and she would want to unload, process everything. She didn't want me to fix anything. She just wanted to be heard. And again, this created some friction in our relationship because I would go straight into problem solving mode and say, well, you can do this and you can do that, and let's do this. And it wasn't what she wanted at all. She just wanted to be heard. So I think this is, again, one of those areas where the mismatch in approaches and what people are actually looking for. And again, it might be a little bit personality type, uh, but yeah, fixing. versus processing?
I think we need to be very aware ourselves as to what we want. So I think this is part of the problem. Um, and I now label it as such because I have friends who are fixers, and I've barely got the sentence out and they're fixing it.
Mm.
And I'm kind of like, no, this is not what I'm wanting. So, again, bringing the awareness to this. If you are, so recognize when you start talking to the person, what's your purpose? Are you delivering them a problem to fix? Well, you might be, but the first thing you might want to do is get it all out. So I think it's best to be aware and then label it. I just need to tell you this. Don't do anything yet. Don't fix it. I read the book years ago, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and it's really helpful with the kind of and it's not necessarily men versus women. It is personality or whatever. But again, it's about recognizing it. So we can be helpful, right? This is, I think, a lot of people, and again, this is kind of the guesser type people, we miss the fact, like I've said this to people before, you say the woman comes home and she's had a haircut, and she says to, firstly, she expects the husband to notice. So the husband has messed up already because he didn't notice. So then she's like, "Oh, I'm wise to this. I'm going to help him out." And she goes, "Look, I've had a haircut." And then the poor guy is there and he's not sure what to say. And so I say, no, help him more. Say, isn't it great? Or, oh, what a disaster. Because otherwise he's in a trap again. And I saying he, but look, this is, take this as a guide. So, firstly, announce it. I've had a haircut, but then give them a clue. Isn't it great? Isn't it a disaster? Let them know if you're happy with it, because otherwise you're unhappy with it. And he goes, "Oh, it looks lovely," because he thinks it's the right thing to say. And you're like, "No, it's not. They've ruined it. Look, can't you see?" So you are allowed to help people and tell them what you're wanting rather than assuming that they can mind read.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that came up for me when you were saying that. One is there's a couple that I've seen occasionally on, I don't know, Facebook or Instagram or whatever. And she comes out and she says, "What do you think of this outfit?" And he says, "Do you want the husband answer or do you want the truth?" And she says, "Well, I want the husband answer." And so he tells her, "It looks wonderful. You look great," all those sorts of things. And then she says, "No, I want the husband answer. I don't care." And he walks off. You know, as long as you dress, we're going out, you're fine. You look great. Doesn't matter. So, you know, that was one of those things that was coming up for me. What do you actually want to hear?
Yeah.
Right? Is a really good question to ask and trying to interpret that. The other thing that came up for me when you were talking was we need to spend the time to sometimes prompt what we want. And I think, again, you're right. We need to know what we want first. And sometimes the person that's listening needs to slow down a little bit. Okay, i.e., me. And it's taken me 20 years to learn that I don't always need to fix everything. So, there's learning on both sides of a relationship. Um, that sometimes it's just about being present and letting them talk and process what's gone on for them that day.
Well, good. I'm glad you said that because I was just thinking, shall we move on to processors now? So good lead in.
So sometimes, unfortunately, um, myself included, some of us, and I've seen this in some of the men's chats that I'm a part of, we don't always listen 100% when our wife is, processing her day and it's half a mind, but it gives her the clear air to, express herself and get it out of her system. So I will be honest and say I don't always listen 100% when she's processing.
Well, I tell you an interesting thing. So I have a few children, and I have a couple of them who do this to me, which is totally acceptable. They know I'm not listening. And in fact, my daughter, who's got a lot of work on at the moment, and she needs to talk, it's just more beneficial if she talks it through out loud. And it's actually reached a point where it's like, "You don't need to listen, I just need to tell you this." And I literally don't have to listen to a word. And she knows I'm not listening, but it's that feeling that she's got an audience. So, I'm not saying you'll get away with this because the woman's probably gonna go, "Are you listening? Did you hear me? What do you think?" And you're like, "Oh, I switched off." But my son was the same. He said, I just have to tell you this." And it's just about getting it out. And I mean, this is a whole different topic, but I tell you what, voicing something, getting it out of your head is so, so helpful. So I think it's really important. And again, let's have both sides knowing what we're doing here. Let's not be keeping each other in the dark. I just need to tell you about my day. You haven't got to do anything. You haven't even got to comment on it. I just need to get it out because I need to process it. And this is part of the processing. Now, again, another topic we won't go into, the purpose of processing. It's like a filing system, okay? It's like you worked all day, you have a mountain of papers, you've shoved them all in your, I don't know, briefcase. I don't know. We don't, this is all bit, we don't have paper and we don't have briefcases, but go with me on this. You shove them in your bag, you get home, you've got a mountain of papers. Now you've just got to sort them into different piles, put them back together, and you can put them in your case before you head to work, so they're there for work the next day. So processing is important. And I say, we won't go into it more now, just that it's a thing. Okay. And we have to do it. And sometimes we have to do it out loud.
Yes, 100% agree. Even fixes need to process. No, we can't always fix everything, and I think sometimes it's the desire or the drive to fix everything that can lead us sometimes into trouble, and sometimes even fixes need to stop and just understand what's going on before we can do anything else. And keeping in mind that we can't fix everything, there are the things we can directly influence, control, fix, and there are the things we can't. The desire to fix the things that we can't can lead us to more stress. So identifying what we can fix, can't fix, not forgetting but not overly worrying about the things we can't control can be really helpful.
Now, possibly another topic, so I won't go into it too much here, but fixing a problem for somebody else actually isn't necessarily the best way. And I just give you two brief examples. So, firstly, as coaches, if you come to us with a problem, we don't just march in and fix it for you. And I learnt this through my children years ago. They come home from school and they tell me the problem. I became the fixer. Okay. I would be straight in, well, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? Or I'll do this. Or it wasn't the right approach. And I can't remember when it happened, but anyway, the switch around happened. And I allowed them and I said, what could you do about it? What do you want to do about it? Or some such question that prompted them to come up with the fixing. So, to all you fixers out there, it is great and it is helpful, but it does have its place. And there are times when you're not going to fix for someone else. It's not helpful.
Absolutely. All right. I want to talk about another communication mismatch. And this one, uh, I'm pretty sure 95% of us, even more, have experienced this at some point. And this is where we get a brief text message or a brief email and we get the meaning wrong. We interpret the words incorrectly. And we started talking about this a little bit last time. Now, the reason this is important and the reason I want to bring it up here is because when we don't have context for language, we lose a lot of the meaning. Did I say that well?
Explain that.
Okay. So if we only get a few words, we will interpret those words based on how we are feeling, not the way the sender intended. So if we've got a little bit of negativity in our own bodies, in our own minds at that particular moment, and we get a I'm fine, we might take that as a I don't really want to talk to you right now. Leave me alone. I'm fine. Where if we're quite happy and we only get those two words, we'll put a more positive spin on that. So I know there are some people in the community who believe that emojis do not belong in emails. However, if there is a particular sentiment or emotion or meaning that needs to be connected to the words that you're using, then I think those emojis absolutely have place. Because as I said, I think most of us at some point have received a very brief or text based response in some way that we have no other way to interpret the sender's intent, whether they're happy, sad, or otherwise, or angry, or whatever, where emojis can help share that emotion, if you like, hence the name.
That makes sense because emojis, because what we're missing with the text-based email language is the body language. Even over the phone, you can tell a little bit if someone's smiling or whatever. So we're missing, and we've talked about it, about how much is nonverbal. So it makes sense that emoji to give you a hint of angry face, happy face, puzzled, whatever, it's just going to give you, they're just giving you a hint of what their body language is, to be clear. And I think it's a great idea. It saves me so much. I can throw in that emoji and I think, right, I'm just being clear now. Am I joking? Am I serious? Am I angry? I think it's so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're more familiar with it in text messages than we are in emails. But I think sometimes it may not seem professional. However, if you're angry with somebody and you're writing and using a lot of exclamation marks and those sorts of things, then maybe an angry face might be absolutely appropriate to continue to express your dissatisfaction with the situation or the person or whatever the case may be. But I think if something can be taken in different ways, then using those emojis can really help make sure that the intent is being understood by the recipient.
I did this once where I got a message and I thought it was kind of a angry one. It was an email, I think, so there was enough language in it. And then I thought, right, I'm not gonna, kind of be reactive. I'm gonna test it. I'm gonna pretend this is a happy email where they're not having a go at me. And I read it in that tone. And I also read it in the they're angry with me tone. And it was quite interesting. It could not be read in the happy tone. So to me, it was like, okay, this is clear they are annoyed, but it was a really good way to test rather than assume, okay, I think this person's annoyed with me. And then you read it with your annoyed voice as though they are, you're play acting. Just trial it the other way and see if it can be read the other way. And then it's a bit ambiguous.
Or you can get a second opinion, share it with somebody else and ask them how they interpret it, uh,
Hmm.
as an alternate way. And I know I've done that. How does this read? Or does this read angry to you? Those sorts of things. Someone said, yeah, that sounds really angry. Okay, they're definitely angry with me. Um, yeah, there's different ways of doing it. So I think there's this isn't about trying to choose our words more carefully. It's about being flexible, perhaps in the way we communicate and using emojis as I'm going to use the words warmth indicator or an emotional indicator of what we're trying to communicate or the way the message is intended. So, all right, we've got one more thing I want to talk about today.
Okay.
All right. A practical takeaway for everybody when we start. So, we've talked about um, fixes and processes. We've talked about guesses and askers. So, how can we get this communication on track so that people are actually being understood and we are providing what the other person needs? So, one question. Do you want me to help you brainstorm solutions or do you want me to listen? All right. Especially for, well, I suppose this really goes for both of them. What do you really need from me right now? And that might even be a better question. What do you need from me right now?
And I think there's a pre-question that we ask ourselves first is what's the purpose of this communication?
Yeah. Yeah. And when we start asking those questions, why are we here? What's the purpose? What do you need from me? And that's probably a little bit more direct. Okay. One of those askers and sometimes guessers, you need to ask the question. You need to be a little bit more direct, especially if you don't know. Because sometimes, and we've talked about this before, when we rely on our gut a little bit too much, our gut might be wrong. It can be wrong. And what we're guessing might be wrong. So ask the question, what do you need from me right now? It can save a lot of confusion, a lot of misunderstandings, and you're making sure that you meet the needs of the person who's communicating with you.
Now, I have to say my communication has improved a lot since my awareness has it, in all of this has come about. So that's the point today. Really, is highlighting your awareness of all of this, because otherwise you're still in the you're still blind about it, or you're still in the dark. So this is the awareness, so that now you're in a position where you can think, right, what's this communication about? What do I want? Or you're on the other side. What's this person wanting from me? Are they just downloading? And then you can be really open and clear and go, they might be taken aback. Oh, you're just wanting to, tell me about it. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, I guess so. So don't be surprised if they weren't aware until you ask them.
Even when we talk about, and I suppose it works as well, even in text-based communication, so emails and um, text messages, we can still ask that question, what do you need from me? Or how do you want me to respond to this? Because that again is clarifying what the sender needs from you in return. Do they need you to be engaged and happy, or do they need you to be a little bit repentant? I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing. What do you need from me right now? And so I
Yeah.
don't think with any of these things that we've talked about today, this question doesn't work. It works for all three.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, we're going to have people communicating so much better now.
Fingers crossed. We're not going to solve all the world's communication problems, but if we can help a couple of people, then that's, I think, a really great thing. All right. Thank you, Vanessa. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks for being with us today on Chaos, Courage and Coffee. Remember, you're not alone and you don't have to figure it all out at once. What part of today's conversation stood out for you?
This podcast is about showing up in the mess, not waiting until it's all sorted out. If today helped, share it with someone else who might need it too.
And if you're navigating your own version of chaos, we'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment, message us, or join the conversation.
We'll be back soon with more honest talk, less pressure, and just enough courage to get through whatever's next.
See you next time on Chaos, Courage and Coffee.